So I want to turn to several individuals who are in other parts of this war I call the war for the free world, including some of those who are really leading the fight. We have a pre-recorded videotape by a prominent anti-Islamist leader on the continent of Europe these days. He is a Dutch parliamentarian by the name of Geert Wilders.
I've been asked to address the question, what needs to be done for the free world to prevail? My friends, the answer is easy. The largest threat to the free world today is Islam. And we must confront this threat. We must oppose it. How? Here are 5 important things that I believe we must do. First, we must tell the truth about Islam. The most important thing which we and the citizens of the free world must realize is that Islam is not a religion of peace. It is a violent, totalitarian ideology that wants to conquer and submit the entire world. Islam has declared war on us. Islam orders its followers to wage jihad. We see it all over the world. In Nigeria, Boko Haram abducts schoolgirls, forces them to convert to Islam and turns them into sex slaves. In Iraq and Syria, the Islamic State slaughters people in the most horrible way. In Iran, gays are being hanged. In Pakistan, Christians are being murdered. In Saudi Arabia, apostates are beheaded. From Gaza, Islam fires rockets on Jewish homes. And all over the free world, from Ottawa to Sydney, from New York and Boston to Paris, from Moscow to London, from Bombay to Nairobi, terrorists are committing horrible atrocities. And the root of all this violence is Islam. Not radical Islam, not Islamism, Islam. Muhammad, the founder of Islam, was a terrorist who participated in beheadings and enslaving people. The Quran, Islam's holy book, orders hatred against unbelievers. Fight Islam, fight against them, until Allah's religion reigns supreme, says Surah 8, verse 39. Or, when you meet the unbelievers, smite their necks, says Surah 47, verse 4. And people who say that Islam is a religion of peace are either ignorant about Islam or are lying about it. And we must expose these lies. Islam is violent. Islam is dangerous. The less Islam, the better.
I would like to highlight the fact that we have heard from some speakers, notably some of our European friends, Lars Hedegaard, Geert Wilders, discuss Islam, not radical Islamism, not Islamist movements and things like that. And I think that I would like to offer some food for thought here, which is that one of the bases, or perhaps the basis of control that Islam uses against people is Islamic slander law, which prohibits criticism of Islam, and of course the death penalty for leaving Islam, apostasy. That's a pretty big control. And I think, and I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I've talked about it with many of you over the years, I do believe that when we and some of our most fiery, passionate leaders, political leaders, persist in discussing Islamism and radical Islam, and most of the fighting right, you might say, subscribes to this as well. I believe that we are operating under Islamic slander law that prohibits the criticism of Islam. And when you hear someone like Lars or Geert Wilders and some of the others actually speak about Islam, it is simple, it is also defensible. And when we go back to the language of radical Islam, I think the implication is always that there is some regular Islam that has a regular Quran and a regular Sharia and a regular prophet that is okay and completely compatible, and all the measures that we want to take to protect ourselves or to fight against these incursions into our own liberties, we're always completely still shadowboxing with this fantasy notion. And I say it's fantasy only because the books are there to prove it, as Noni Darwish mentioned earlier. So I just put it out there for somebody to think about, because I know everyone here really, really wants to get at this and move this forward. And I think, we have a lot to learn from some of our European friends and others.
Steve Coughlin.
Thank you. I'd like to kind of write in on that draft. We had someone talk earlier about the fact that Sisi stood before Al-Azhar and called out the violent extremist radical radical extremists, violent people, fundamentalists. I could keep going here. He did not do that. He went to Al-Azhar and he told the imams at Al-Azhar, and that is as doctrinal and mainstream as it gets, that they are responsible for what's going on, not calling them radical, but recognizing that their tradition, meaning Islam to date, is, I think as he sees it, going to destroy the Muslim world. But in doing that, he didn't call them radical, he called them who they are. And the blind sheikh was brought up earlier, his only status is that his status as an imam from Al-Azhar. Qawadari is from Al-Azhar. Azam, who founded the Muslim Al-Qaeda, is from Al-Azhar. We've heard phrases like radical Islamic extremist, extreme Sharia, fundamentalist, which if I could, when you use the word fundamentalist, which is actually a term that only applies to a 20th century Protestant Christian movement, you're allowing that word to be used against Christians in the future, because there's no such thing as fundamentalist Islam, okay, and a whole lot of other language. What you're doing is you're denying the fact that Islam is what it is. Now, I understand the tactics of it, but here's the thing. One of the reasons I use Reliance of the Traveler is because at the very beginning of the book, it says it was approved by Al-Azhar. And then you go to another page and you get the triple hit. It said it was approved by the American Muslim Brotherhood, which is everybody, anybody in this government and media talk to. Okay? It was signed also by, he also signed that in his capacity representing a school in, or a center in Saudi Arabia, so it also represents Saudi buy-in. But most important, that entity he signed off on their name, I think it's I can't remember what it is in Riyadh or Jeddah, is the OIC's subordinate element that does Sharia law, so that we know when we quote Reliance of the Traveler, it represents the prevailing view of Sunni Islam, period. So if I can take a quote out of that book, it is Islam, as is understood by everybody you talk to. So if you think, so when you decide you're going to call this extreme radical, you've already submitted, if you're, I understand the tactics of it, that you have to bring people along, but if you're basically saying, as some people are, radical Islamic extremists, they're extremely correct. They're violently correct. And that is why the moderates can't get a hand in there. That's why they're all over here. So I just think we need to get there.
David Yerushalmi.
I want to have Rob come and speak to Diana West's comment about the imposition of the blasphemy laws in the United States de facto in some of the cases we've dealt with.
Bring that mic a little closer.
But before I do that, I just want to drill down on something. This is a group of professionals, and I want to make sure that we're all speaking at the same level. Understand that the Quran, the scripture, and even the hadith, which are the legal sunnah, those sunnah that have legal implications, in and of itself, while it's the basis of Sharia, the threat doctrine, in and of itself, it's somewhat meaningless. In the same way that in the Torah or the New Testament, there is the lex talionis, an eye for an eye. It literally says that. But what comes on top of that is everything. Sharia is scripture and it is hadith. But what it really is millennia of usul al-fiqh, the science of Islamic jurisprudence, fiqh. That doctrine tells the devout Muslim what abrogation is. It tells the devout Muslim how to read any particular surah. The problem that Zuhdi has, and I'm a great admirer of Zuhdi's, and we have all kind of gone back and forth on that. But the problem he does have is if you're going to ask any moderate or academic Muslim who wants to read those verses differently than they have been over 1,000 years, he has to figure out a way to, as it were, replace the ulama, the legal authorities. It would be like me saying, I want to interpret the Commerce Clause as it literally says, which is not how it's interpreted. The only way I could do that is to get Andy or someone else appointed to the Supreme Court. Well, I can't do that, so it's just not reasonable. Yeah, not in any Senate that I know of.
we're holding out great hope nonetheless.
Now,
As a national security intelligence officer, I have a duty to make a call about who constitutes a national threat and who doesn't. And we take a look at what that doctrine is, and we assess the relevant combat power capable of being projected from the institutional understanding, which is the doctrinal understanding, which these people have behind them from Al-Azhar, and we have the moderates who do not have a basis. And so when we take a look at how we're going to orient on the enemy, we are not orienting we're not, with the moderate group, we have people who lack the foundation to sustain an assault inside their own domain. I mean, I put my life at the risk of a lot of Muslims just very recently, meeting with a lot of the Sisi's people. Okay, or people who are close to him, I should say. I support everything he's doing. He knows that what a lot of people don't know is the next day he had Al-Azhar imams come out and say what he said was apostasy. And when someone does an analysis of that, they have to say they're right. And we have to understand that they're right. And we have to understand that because it means, first of all, Sisi crossed the Rubicon in his own domain. There's no going back on that. And second of all, we support what he's doing, but we also have to understand that he's drawing on the current feeling inside Egypt that they just don't want to do that anymore. That's not moderate Islam, and we don't need to talk about it. We don't want to do it. And I'm all for that, so I think it's not good to use the words like moderate, because you actually crouch those people out. You brand them moderate, that's what makes them get tagged by the Al-Azhar imams. Just let that argument go. But it's important. Personally, I don't have a stake. I completely agree with everything you said. But I also think from the combat power analysis point of view, when we look at what Zudi says along with what the Imam of Al-Azhar says in any century, and we say, wow, it's like that. We can't pretend that doesn't make a difference, not in our personal opinions. I could care less. But it makes a difference in how we do an estimate of the threat and how to defeat them and what it will take. Well, I'll stop there.
Could I ask someone who hasn't asked for recognition to say something? Jerry Johnson, president of the National Religious Broadcasters Association, you have been very much engaged, in particular, on helping promote this understanding of our founding values and so on, but also on the threat that Sharia blasphemy laws and other restrictions on freedom of expression represent. And I would welcome
in
your
a couple of
contribution.
weeks, February 24th, we'll be having our convention in Nashville. We'll have about 4,500 people there. We have 17 speakers on Islam. This has never been done before at NRB. We have thousands of members. We have about 60 million listeners every week, not potential audience, but actual audience. And I have to tell you, I think evangelical Christians have been kind of late to the game in this. I think we've heard different expressions and actually different views of how to approach this, but defeating jihad is going to be a coalition effort. So I think that's okay, but I want to represent that coalition, part of the coalition today, evangelical Christians, to say, I think, there's a theological challenge. Most evangelical Christians have been thinking about missions and evangelism and, winning Muslims to Christ, to Christianity. That's been what they think about. And stopping this at the source, moderates, moderns, nominal Muslims, liberal Muslims. And I think, that's going to remain a priority. We're going to affirm that. I think what we're going to be doing is stressing, though, another biblical truth, which really comes from the Old Testament in Genesis 9:6. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. It's a setting up of order, really, against the taking of human life. And then in the New Testament, Romans 13, that the government powers are ordained of God to use the sword, to use deadly force to protect human life. So, yes, we want to evangelize the moderates. We want to win them. But ISIS, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, and Hamas, they have to be killed. The government has to kill those who want to kill us. And Christian ministers must teach that. They must understand that, and they must demand that of government leaders.